Given the high degree of vulnerability to natural hazards across Pacific countries, the European Union and the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, OACPS, teamed up since 2011 with the World Bank Group and its Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR, to launch the ACP-EU Natural Disaster Risk Reduction Program. From its inception in 2011, activities have supported ACP countries in the Pacific to better protect vulnerable populations from the damaging impacts of disasters and to increase the likelihood of a timely and successful recovery. Through 26 projects implemented across the Pacific, the program has helped governments establish disaster risk management and climate change adaptation as national priorities. The program's technical assistance addressed underlying vulnerabilities to the region's most prevalent natural hazards, especially tropical cyclones. Activities have boosted long-term resilience in key sectors such as construction, housing, and tourism.
Through the ACP European Union Natural Disaster Risk Reduction Program, the European Union has invested in these countries. It has invested in their capacities and it has strengthened their national policy and regulatory frameworks. At the same time, it has strengthened the community-based recovery and resilience.
For example, the program has made a long-lasting impact in Fiji. The Fijian government produced the Climate Vulnerability Assessment that puts significant new detail on what climate change actually means for Fiji's economy. The program has also supported the government in the aftermath of Tropical Cyclone Winston by publishing a set of updated guidelines that improves construction practices, especially for homeowners and for schools, which are often used as shelters during storms. The program also developed the capacity and readiness of Fiji, Samoa and Tonga in deploying drones for disaster and climate risk assessments and rapid identification of damage to the physical environment in post-disaster situations. Overall, the program's activities in the Pacific have strengthened the capacity of governments to increase their resilience to disasters.
We face the same situation in our countries, and this type of activity is good to allow us to share our experiences and maybe to share some ways forward on how we can work together to address the issues of climate change and disaster risk reduction in our areas, and especially in our countries and even in our local communities.
The COVID-19 pandemic has presented an immense challenge to the Pacific region's efforts at building resilience against climate change and disaster risks, particularly since many countries in the region have fragile health systems. Nevertheless, Pacific countries have been working with the ACP-EU NDRR Program to adapt and pair the program's activities, building a climate and disaster risk resilient future with national pandemic responses. Nevertheless, Pacific countries have been working with the ACP-EU NDRR Program to adapt and pair the program's activities, building a climate and disaster risk resilient future with national pandemic responses. In Papua New Guinea, an assessment of emergency preparedness, response and recovery systems supporting the National Disaster Centre was adapted to include health emergencies and pandemics. This helped support the government's COVID-19 response. The ACP-EU NDRR Program has been a driving force in helping Pacific countries strengthen their resilience to climate change and disaster risks. The program's activities in the Pacific have strengthened the capacity of governments to manage their coastal assets, to increase their resilience to disasters, and provided roadmaps for investments in financial, construction, and human resources.
When we ensure that communities participate, then it means that their really needs, their priorities are factored into. Because sometimes, like if it's externally driven, then that's the view from outside. But when we work within, then the key critical needs of a community are taken on board. So I think that's why social inclusiveness is important to be integrated into the whole business of resilience.
The program has worked alongside key stakeholders such as governments, international organizations, donors, civil society, the private sector and academia to protect sustainable development gains from the impacts of disasters.